All right, so now that we have a camera hooked up to the computer, let's take a look at what happens inside of Capture One for shooting tethered. So, as I mentioned before, there's a tethered tool tab, and when we click on this, it gives us an interface that shows us a bunch of information. At the top, there is a histogram that shows up once the images come in. Below this, we have the basic camera information here. For example, we can see that the camera has the ISO set at 100, f-stop is f16, no exposure compensation is going. There's an indicator at how well the battery is doing, and if I hover above it, it actually tells me it's at 80%. It tells me that the white balance is set for automatic white balance and that the file type is set for RAW. I can go in here and click on the white balance and change it to flash. Since I've got a studio set up, that's probably the best way to do it. If I click on the shutter speed, I could say 1/160th is probably a little too high. I can bring it down for the set flash synchronization speed. If I was doing exposures with available light and I was metering, I could go in and change the metering modes here, but since we're basically using strobes, we're not concerned about it. I can also change the f-stop here. One of the coolest features is the capability of actually doing focus, and we'll show that in a minute when we have a live view preview. Then under the next option down here, we have a gigantic list of all of the settings inside of the camera that you can set. Basically the ones I showed you, you can click on up in this interface here, but we can get into some deep modes. All kinds of things. We can change image sizes, we can change metering modes, autofocus area settings, uh, number of bursts, if we're doing front curtain, rear curtain, those types of features. Um, the focus modes are set by the camera, those are locked out. And then under photo shooting, we have a bunch of options. So let's close the first off. So this is the camera ones here. And then under this, we have photo shooting, and it says what happens when we shoot. Image area, we're shooting full frame. Auto DX crop could be on, which would help if we're using a Nikon lens that is a crop sensor lens that you put on a full frame camera. It would actually do that automatically. Um, Once again, back to the raw file setting. Color space is set to Adobe RGB. But as you guys know, a RAW file doesn't care about that. That's only specific if we were shooting JPEGs. And a bunch of other Nikon controls that I don't have to explain because they're for a Nikon camera. Then I can go into even more fine tuning in terms of adjusting the white balance more specifically to whatever it is that I'm shooting. So for example, if I wanted to go in and really get the fine color temperature exactly where I wanted, this is where I could do all those settings. And then we have a bunch of other deeper Nikon camera modes, which we can go in and just turn off. These are just a bunch of comments and things like that. Here is the sensitivity of the ISO. Movie shooting modes, which we don't care about. It just basically gets into the deep menu of your camera and reflects all of that information right here. So this gets a little bit cumbersome to look at. I tend to go in and try to close these all so I don't have to look at them, but I notice that sometimes every time I start up a new capture project, it tends to just do all this kind of crazy, fill these up. Now, as mentioned before, when you're shooting for tethered capture, it is really important that you go in and set this up to be working for well, not working. Sorry, I brain farted there, guys. Basically, what you want to be doing is this. So I'm going to go up to File. I'm going to create a new session. As I mentioned before, a session is a better way to do tethered captioning, or tethered shooting, captioning. So I'll go ahead and I will create a new session. I will choose where I want it to go. So for example, I'm going to go ahead and choose my external hard drive. And in here, I'm just going to go ahead and go to Photo 5 folder. And I'll just create a new folder in here, and we'll call it tether sample. And so I will go ahead and create that for that location there. Once I do that, I'll say go ahead and choose. And once again, I'll name I'm putting it in a folder, so I'm going to go ahead and name the session. Once again, tether capture. Tether capture sample. It creates subfolders in here. It creates the captures, the selects, the output, and the trash like you've seen before. And it also gives the name to this. So this would be the capture name. So we'll go ahead and say OK. And we'll go ahead and swap it back out. And it really quickly opens back up into this new session. Once again, you can see it's a session because it says up here, CO for capture 1, session, database. All right, so that's the file. Now, moving forward. Once again, camera settings, we went just through all of that. I've closed all of these so I don't have to see them anymore. But it is kind of cool. You can click them really quickly open if you want to, and then close them back up. I'll go ahead and close this back. The naming is right here. This is up to you on what you want to do in terms of doing this. For example, the way it's going to be naming this is basically the name of the shoot itself that it brought in from how I named this shoot. And then I can go in here and once again grab any one of these tokens and add things in. For example, I could put it in like an underscore or a dash. And then I could go ahead and choose the counter and choose 2 digits or 3 digits. A big photo shoot's probably gonna have a lot of images, so you could probably by default just go to 4 digits. Then we'll go ahead and say OK. So basically it would be doing a name. Oops, I didn't get the actual thing in there. So let me go back and do that again. So once you go in and you choose 4, then you gotta either drag this up or double click it so it actually shows up. And then when you go ahead and say OK, it shows you over here how it's going to actually be naming it. If for some reason you want to go in and get the underscores in here, it basically pulled the name from the name of the actual session. But if you wanted to add things to that name, you can do it. So now I've got all the underscores that I like. And it tells me the destination of capture location. It says destination capture. It tells me how much space is left on the hard drive. But I can choose a different folder if I wanted it to go somewhere else. But right now it's going into the caption folder that's inside of the session. And then more capture adjustments. ICC profile, it goes in default. It just comes from what is coming from the camera. But if you have a profile setup, if you've profiled your camera already and you've already shot the color checker and created a custom profile, you could actually have it applied at the moment you're shooting, which is great. Orientation basically is default. Metadata is all the defaults that you have. Other copy from last. So if you're continuing a shoot and you're doing a session for every shoot throughout a 2 or 3 day shoot that's on location or something like that, you could basically bring in information from previous sessions and bring them over. And once again, you can add styles and reprocessing and stuff like that while you're actually capturing the images. There's also a feature for an overlay, so that if you're actually doing a mock-up of an album cover or a magazine cover ad copy for an ad, you could basically drag that overlay image here, and then when you're shooting you can kind of have the model move, or if you're shooting product you can move the product around so it actually fits with the overlay. I will try to do a deep dive video in a future lecture to show you guys how to actually use that. So once you've got all this going, there's a couple ways to go ahead and start working. If you want, you could go ahead and start shooting right here inside of Capture One, have your laptop next to the computer or to the camera, and you could just be shooting while you're right there with the camera. Or you can actually shoot with the camera and it just comes in straight into here. But I'm going to go ahead and open up the live view for you guys to see. So this is that setup that you guys saw a few minutes ago. Right now the preview is in a tungsten mode, or I'm sorry, it's in a flash mode. So it's showing the model as a basically tungsten lit because of the modeling lights on the model. So I did mention you can focus, so I definitely want to show you that really quickly. This is kind of cool. I'm going to go ahead and throw the focus off real quick, and you'll notice it's completely out of focus. And then I could go in and go fast focus here, and then start doing some tinkering. And as I'm manually focusing and trying to get this to where it needs to be, it will give me a confirmation at a certain point that it's back in focus. So it's kind of cool. This little red light should light up. If this is not going fast enough as I'm manually doing it, I can also click the autofocus button and it will quickly autofocus on the model. And then I can just quickly notice that it actually shows me it's focused. So this is a very cool way to really fine tune what you're doing. Obviously, a lot of people just like to focus on the camera, but if you're shooting in a certain way where you're actually not there and the models are working, this would be the way to do it. Once you get this all the way you want it to be, you just push this big button here and take a single photograph, and almost immediately it shows up inside of Capture One. And so then you could just keep shooting as the model's doing things. Some people will use remotes in their hand that fire the camera, or a remote that actually plugs into the computer that fires this. There's a variety of different ways to do it. And as you guys saw from the setup earlier, I was shooting with an actual tethered cable, but there are systems that actually do transmission from camera to Capture One. You can use iPads, you can use all kinds of different things with different software that you put onto the devices that fire it, and you can actually buy a special device that actually shoots. For example, if I was shooting for a sports organization and I'm using Capture One to shoot some sort of a sporting event inside of an arena, let's say college volleyball or something like that, I could be shooting, and then as I'm shooting, the images are being transmitted from my camera to whoever is running the picture desk at the mobile thing for the newspaper or the sports organization. So Capture One, the photographer may not even see any of this stuff till afterwards. And a lot of times that's the way they do it, because then the on-site person doing the tech is basically a picture editor. They're choosing the shots that are getting out over the wire as the team is playing and either winning or losing, depending on what's going on. So that's basically the quick way to look at how all of this works. You can also turn on a few other couple of custom features in here. For example, you can have a grid overlay showing up just like you do when you're inside of Capture One. You can pause the playback if you want, just to kind of save some battery on the camera, then click it back on to go back to live view. You can see a before and after if you were using some sort of features. So a lot of the same things that you actually see when you're actually processing are actually in here. And there's a depth of field tool, which is a deep dive. Look for the video on that later. And there we go. And we also have a quick preferences settings here. So if there are other things we need to do for capture, this basically opens up from the same preferences that you would find here, but it opens up straight to the capture, and you can look at the different options. For example, Canons currently can shoot wireless from their cameras straight into a computer using Wi-Fi or local area network, and Capture One can work with that. Nikon might be able to do that too. It's not turned on by default, and I'll probably do some testing on that later on for my own personal, because I am a Nikon shooter. So in a nutshell, that covers how to do tethered capture.